folks, to the launch of Ron Carey's Songs for Older Life. And it will be launched by his brother. But first of all, as usual, the sheriff, the CEO, the main man, Dominic Taylor will say a few words. Dominic Taylor.
Agus tá fáil go roimh. Tá áthas ar le bheith an seo í seo ag seoladh Songs for Older Life an leabhar filiachta nua le Ron Carey. Welcome everybody, and thank you for joining us here tonight for the launch of Songs for Older Life by Ron Carey. As Tom said, my name is Dominic Taylor, Director of the Limerick Writers Centre and Revival Press. Last Friday we launched This Deluge of Words by Michael Durack, and tonight it's Ron Carey's new collection. Next week we will launch Tim Cunningham's new book, Pery, and the following Friday, The Architecture of Love from Kieran Bevel. It's been 8 years since we published Ron Carey's debut collection of poetry, Distance. And since then, Ron's star in the poetry world has continued to rise, and he has gained acceptance of his work and as a poet at the very highest level. And we at Revival Press are very proud to have been instrumental in bringing Ron's work to a wider public. More so because Ron, like another Limerick writer, Frank McCourt, came to writing and publishing late in life, and we feel that his story, like Frank's, has been an inspiration to others who also feel that because of life's commitments, they did not get a chance to uncover their creative talents. Tonight, in the pages of this really handsome hardback edition of Songs for Older Life, he brings us poems of celebration about, as he says, individuals who blossomed in the afternoon, twilights, and late evenings of their lives. Over the past number of years, Ron, as a teacher in workshops with various groups at the Limerick Writers Centre, has shared his story, his art, his craft with numerous others, and has been a driving force for us in being able to encourage individuals to challenge themselves into unveiling their own creative selves. From absolute beginners to the more experienced participants, Ron offers what he will again offer tomorrow morning at our In Your Own Words workshop, the trust and support to gently push participants into seeing the potential everyone has within. Songs for Older Life, the book we are launching here this evening, is the 144th title Limerick Writers Centre and Revival Press published in its community publishing program since 2008. Since then, our publishing activities have straddled many genres. There's been lots of poetry, short story, memoir, history, and the novel. And our prime motivation is to publish and promote writing within the community. This is the vital role that small independent publishers like Revival Press play in the life of our communities. And Limerick Writers Centre and Revival Press are committed to continue to contribute to the spread of ideas and literature that can, in the words of Seamus Heaney, catch the heart off guard and blow it open. And I'm certain that Ron's new book can do that. And as a community press, our aim is always to give writers and poets the opportunity to see their work in print. That's why we actively encourage writers, from the serious career-minded to people who write for pleasure, healing, personal growth, insight, or just to inform. At the back end of all our Revival Press poetry books, we put a quotation from the US poet Jane Hirshfield. In it she says that a good poem shakes us awake through its beauty, its insight, or its music. It shakes and seduces us out of the common gaze and into a genuine looking. And make no mistake, she continues, I consider this a radical event. Ron Carey's new work contains all these attributes: beauty, insight, and music. And indeed, it is a radical event, as Hirshfield says. The definition of radical is something that stems from the root. And I know from reading Ron's work through the years that he has a genuine connection with the root and soil of our community. So on two counts, I'm delighted to see so many of you here this evening to support Ron's book launch. Firstly, it is great that Ron's new work is now available, and I'm sure he will be an influence on all of us and Irish poetry in the coming years. Secondly, It is through the sale of books like Ron's that we can continue to reinvest and publish new writers. So when you buy Ron's book, you're not only supporting him, but other local writers. To conclude, I'd like to thank a number of people who helped make this occasion a success. Thanks firstly to Ron for allowing us to publish his work. Thanks also to his brother Greg, who did the fabulous cover image, and he will shortly launch the collection for us. And to William O'Neill and staff here at the People's Museum, my own colleagues who have unfailingly supported our efforts over the years, and to Lot Bender, our book designer, who works selflessly to make sure our books are of the highest quality possible. Go on.
Thank you, Dominic. I'd now like to invite Greg Carey, who's not unknown to the author, to officially launch the book. Greg Carey.
Hi everyone. When Ron asked me to introduce his book, Songs for Older Life, apart from being pleased and scared simultaneously, I spent most of my time noting how I responded to the poems and what I saw as Ron's underlying intention in writing about the lives of other people. Though we are brothers, I claim no greater insight, and my remarks are not meant to be definitive but purely what I see as the underlying message and the motivating principles behind Ron's work. My comments are also coloured by my own background in philosophy. Many of the people Ron draws his inspiration from had experiences in their later lives that prompted them to change their life's direction radically. These life-altering experiences have been ever present in literature. For example, Dante in the Divine Comedy says, "In the middle of the journey of my life, I awoke in a dark wood, where the straight way was wholly lost." In later years, we grow accustomed to loss, and the fact that life takes more from you than it gives to you. It can take your loved ones, your friends, and your health. However, there is consolation. There is a deep well of memory to draw on, and I think of remembering as a religious act. The word religion from the Latin religare, to bind it back to the real and the true, to the transcendent in an individual life. Pablo Neruda, the Chilean poet, gives an insight into the power of being bound unexpectedly to a transcendent truth when writing for the first time, he says, and I wrote the first bare lines, pure foolishness, pure wisdom of one who knows nothing, and suddenly I saw the heavens unfasten and open. That is a profound spiritual experience, encouraging those brave enough to sit before the blank page or the empty canvas. In seeking to write this truth, we are invariably drawn into the broader world of philosophers and theologians who tried to define truth. Philosophically, for instance, Heidegger, the German philosopher, says that to think the truth of being is to think that which is closest. It would follow then that giving voice to what is close to one's life, one is simultaneously resonating with the larger truth of existence. Plato has said that time is the changing image of eternity. If so, then searching for meaning in the details of our lives reveals a timeless truth. So there is a constant underground energy drawing the artist towards the deepest and fullest expression of life that he or she is capable of, because it is in the direction of the fullest that truth lies. Ron's book has an eclectic mix of writers and artists who achieve literary or artistic success, primarily late in life, through various difficulties, from physical impediments like blindness, living with racism, alcoholism, early career failure, infidelity, and relationship failure. I think he's covered a whole lot there. Having, in most cases, encountered an experience like Dante's meant that the old road was no longer viable. However, one common characteristic persisted: resilience, which energized their later years. What message are we meant to extract from the lives described in this book? Maybe that whatever moves in you moves in me. As such, there is a natural compassion and an openness to other people's stories. This act of passing over, as I see it, the truth of the other, is a spiritual act full of validation and compassionate understanding. It suggests also that there is no absolute point of view, and that maybe we are not as opaque to each other as we imagine. There is a profound life journey that each of us must take, and the truths we encounter in travelling our own paths are worth remembering. Ron's work suggests that defeat is also a yoga that unites us to truer and humbler parts of ourselves that promote real growth and understanding. Indeed, Goethe sees being defeated as vital when he says, "So long as you have not experienced this, to die, and so to grow, you are only a troubled guest on the dark earth." Ron, I think, intends to show us that we are meant, through the inspiration of the people in the book, to remember that the task is to turn the truth of one's life into poetry, and that there is always time to begin to unfold your story. His book is centered on abundance rather than scarcity, which does not mean, however, a life without challenges, and indeed it is these challenges that become the enriching event and the driving force for change. Let me turn now to introduce some of the people featured in Ron's book to explore the courageous arc of their lives. You might like to puzzle out the moral dilemma posed by George de Mauria's Bengali. To highlight the dilemma between victim and perpetrator, Ron writes, from a rather Buddhist non-dual perspective of good and bad, that you do not blame the victim, do not blame the tiger. If there were no lambs, would tigers exist? The thinking that splits things into pure and impure is an impediment that keeps a person from experiencing the real itself and from realizing that all opposites are empty, so no point in clinging to either. A deeper understanding is called for. You might respond to Herb Jeffrey's story of being the first African-American singing cowboy, and Ron's excellent description in his poem, "We Are Such Stuff," of the boyhood bucking bronco excitement of seeing John Wayne ride the big trail across the screen and into the cold heart of Detroit. This poem reminds us that we are indeed the stuff that dreams are made of, whether movies or other artistic forms prompt these dreams. There is inspiration in the life of Dennis Hampsey, the 17th century blind harper. He travelled extensively, married at 86, and lived to 112. From the poems of his life, Ron asks us to
Rupert Murdoch is up there.
what keeps the soul in the body, and how art elevates vision beyond physical impairments, which disappeared in the light of Hampsey's musical accomplishments. Ron writes, with a whimsical voice of Hampsey, "You might marvel at my boldness being so ugly myself, but that would be because you have never heard me play." Poet and storyteller Daisy Turner poignantly describes the death of a young soldier during the American Civil War in her well-known poem, Dear Madam. Ron takes up the important remembering motif in his poem, Blue and Grey, with the lines, "Let Daisy remember how it really was, let her voice be ours." From the checkered history of Raymond Chandler, it would be difficult to see how war experiences and being a bookkeeper prepared him for writing detective novels. Nevertheless, his success with the now famous detective Philip Marlowe, coming to him in his early 50s, reinforces that it is never too late and that the past does not necessarily have to define the future. It's just waiting, like Marlowe, for someone to write it. In what might be a summary for the theme of this book, Ron writes in the accompanying poem, he wasn't too sure what his troubles were. He would just have to wait for someone to write them. Like the preceding poem, sometimes another person is needed to write the history for those without a voice. This, I feel, is one of Ron's underlying missions also. Failure of one kind or another is a recurring theme in the lives addressed in the book. And with the work of Wallace Stevens, the tension between imagination trying to capture what is real and the real itself is contrasted. The balance between the daily grind to make a living and the life of the imagination, succinctly summed up in the lines, "My bulging briefcase tapped me on the knee as if to say time to get back to work," Jason from his poetic musings. The success of Frank McCourt's Angela's Ashes, he couldn't leave Frank out, could we? Published when he was 66, reflects Heidegger's axiom that the truth of being is to be found in that which is closest, a theme reflected in the accompanying poem in the lines, "So I wrote out my despair and made it famous." And that we are constantly faced with the choice of either sitting on a bar stool and watching the world go by, or to write the story of what went into the making of a life. The life of Cézanne, the French artist, highlights the failure in general, and in his case, failure to be accepted into the École des Beaux-Arts, can result in the necessity to carve out a new artistic path, which for him was a new way of seeing the objects he painted. However, this kind of trailblazing is not easy, and in Cézanne's case took 30 years of experimenting to see and sense the objects he was painting more deeply by creating a specific atmosphere in his work. Ron's accompanying poem, The Hangman's House, is full of the type of atmosphere that Cézanne would approve of. Drawing us deeply into Cézanne's painting, we climb the stairs, we follow with foreboding, and there we find only darkness. There nothing real exists. As we get to the top of the house and look out the window, what is there but another voice, another face looking back in true Hitchcock fashion? And we are left to question which of the views is real, and maybe there is no absolute point of view, and reality solely depends on your perspective. What then makes an artist? Years of solitude, many years of life experiences, or both? Ron chooses to write about the life of Grandma Moses, the American folk artist, who came to painting at the age of 78 to explore these questions. Her life is studied in order to understand what gave rise to the innocent rural scenes she painted. In answer, Ron writes, "To find the sweet happiness of those scenes, she had to go past the morning break of arthritic fingers, past the slavery of a childhood domestic, past the common death of 5 children. She not only depicted the early American frontier spirit, but kept the spirit through her life." Life tends to bring us to our knees. And indeed, it is said that if you haven't been brought to your knees by life, you just haven't lived long enough. And this may be true to some degree, but this book's message is that you don't have to stay on your knees. Like Grandma Moses, your store of images can create a new perspective from an old vantage point and reconnect a whole society to its ancestral origins and original values. Finally, in the review of some of the people in this book, let me turn to Mark Twain, who at 44 and 50 respectively wrote The Adventures of Tom Sawyer and later The Adventures of Huck Finn. Born November the 30th, 1885, on the arrival of Halley's Comet, he predicted he would go out with it when he died. His destiny seemed to be written in the very stars themselves. We lesser mortals have our own inner lights, or cosmological dimensions, also Ron reminds us through these poems. Though we can appear opaque to each other, as two stones are opaque, however, when rubbed together, sparks fly out, and there is just enough light to make out star charts on the inner walls, as described by Charles in his poem Stone. We too, like Heaney, can ride to set the darkness, echoing and begin to see what has been written on our inner walls all along, and leave Earth clinging to the blazing tail of a comet, as Ron describes. Disappearing and appearing in a new way is an encompassing motif in Ron's work. Old forms of life disappear and new roads open for the subjects of his book. This motif is echoed in many of the poems where art itself overcomes all impermanence. Ron's book is radical in its dimensions of meaning. It has religious and spiritual and healing dimensions in my view. It shows by passing over to the lives of others itself a spiritual act of non-judgmental, compassionate understanding and a positive self-forgetting. It attempts to bind the readers back to their true natures, binding being the root of what is religious to the very truth of being itself, which is to be found in that which is closest. There is nothing more intimate or closer than the self, and this book encourages us through the examples of others to dare to live more in tune with the deeper truths of who we are and what we love, despite and because of our history. Stealthily, but with focused determination, Ron has set out to question the perceived wisdom of being older. He disagrees with Eliot that in older age we are empty vessels with nothing meaningful to say. We do not have to become Eliot's hollow men, stuffed men, leaning together with headpieces filled with straw, and what we whisper together is quiet and meaningless. Likewise, Yeats's view that this is no country for old men, that an aged man is what a paltry thing, a tattered coat upon a stick. These images are in sharp contrast to the direction of this book. He would agree with Yeats, however, as the book's title suggests, that all is redeemed when the soul can sing, despite and in many cases, because of the difficulties it has met and the scars left by those encounters, unless soul clap its hands and sing and louder sing, for outrage tatter in its mortal dress. Yeah. Ron's poems are songs of healing. They are a balm for the lives they address and an inspiration for others because they are drawn from timeless truth. In singing our own songs, we can, like Yeats and Wordsworth, we may encounter Plato's timeless truths, which promote a hitherto unknown blessing consciousness. Yeats says, my body of a sudden blazed in 20 minutes more or less. It seemed my happiness that I was blessed and could bless. Likewise, Wordsworth's experience was that of receiving a vocation from an encounter with timeless truths, which he could not refuse, else he would be sinning greatly. And after the experience, he says, on I walked in blessedness, which even yet remains. Ron has been inspired to create a community, to bring it into being, and would, I think, agree with the medieval philosopher and theologian Meister Eckhart, who said that each person is a book about God. The truth of an individual's story is personal, but when brought together in the way Ron does in this book, also shows that truth with a capital T is relational, and wounds we suffer are surprisingly common. His mission is, I believe, to inspire us to take the light and the dark elements of our lives, successes and failures, so that we might imagine ourselves differently and even dream, like Antonio Machado, that the golden deeds were making sweet honey out of our failures. Ron's book is affirmative and optimistic. Just a second. I'm going to need some water here. Ron's book is affirmative and optimistic. His message is clear, that a deeper and richer life is possible and that everything changes when you do, no matter how old you are. If you begin, the process will simplify you and demand that you speak from the core essence of things. Once you begin, however, you find you are supported like Wordsworth by forces outside of yourself, which help shape what you create. He says, there is a dark, invisible workmanship which takes discordant elements and makes them move in one society. There is invisible artistry taking discordant elements and making them move together, but one does not have to be a great writer or painter to experience this mystery or blessing, as the pure foolishness of one who knows nothing can open the heavens as it did for Neruda. I thoroughly recommend this book. You will, I think, find the poems are sensitive and penetrative and honour both the singular lives explored and life in general. In its variety, there is, I believe, some poems that will speak to your experiences directly and that you will find inspiring.
Thank you very much, Greg Carey. Wonderful, thought-provoking, philosophical treatise on the author's endeavour. And now it's time to introduce the man himself. Ladies and gentlemen, Ron Carey.
Thanks, Greg.
Back the money, please.
I didn't realise I was so brainy. Hello, everyone. Thank you all for coming. I really do. It's great to see old and new friends here. Without your encouragement, Greg, I wouldn't be here today. And I really want just to mark that point. When I was retiring from work and trying to think what was next for me, Greg encouraged me to work on whatever talent I had, and I followed that as much as I could, and that's why I'm here today. Lots of people helped me on the way, but to start out, Greg helped me most. I've been very lucky. I've had the support of two great brothers all my life. Is the other guy here today? No, well, up to now I've had
Brothers Carmen as well.
And Greg's painting, like this guy is so talented. I try to keep him out of my launches and show it go. Greg's painting is on the cover. He's a poet and a writer, and he's younger than me, which is also... Anyway, let's get on. A special thanks to everybody involved in the book. Special thanks to Lot and Dominic for all their hard work, and the wonderful people of the People's Museum of Limerick for hosting us. I want to thank them. So first of all, with Songs for Older Life, I am not just raging against the dying of the light. I am. We're trying to shine a light so that older people who feel stymied by their age can see how others have reached their own potential late in life, and take encouragement by their example. This isn't an ordinary book of poetry, and I never meant it to be an ordinary book of poetry. I actually took my ego out of it. It's difficult for poets. The book is celebratory in nature, and it highlights men and women who ploughed on, sometimes through all sorts of adversity, to hold on to a vision of who they could be. That's important. To hold on to a vision of who you could be. Not to actually achieve it, but just to hold on to it. Inspired by their lives, I wrote each of them a poem. The poems came from every direction and were as varied as the people themselves. The examples I have taken in the book, from Mark Twain to Mary Wesley, there were many more, but I had to pick. Are all the more impressive because their stories are grounded in fact. In these stories, older people triumph. In these stories, older people triumph. And that is important. And it's important we celebrate this because it is a subject that has little or no attention. And this in spite of seeing a major ageing transition in the world. In spite of all the movements to protect people against all sorts of prejudice, ageism is still widespread in modern life. People are amazed that Johnny Sexton can actually run at the age of 37. Now, no one is asking you to take over the captaincy of the Ireland rugby team at 60. But when we write or paint or sculpt or do anything creative, we are on top of our game. We become our best selves. We are all full of unfulfilled possibilities. We know this in our heart. And it's here within these possibilities that now and again we see our true selves clear as day. And our true selves has no age. Creativity, whether it's a spark that lights the darkness or a roaring fire we can't put out, is within us all. It is part of who we are. Why should we ever give up on who we are? Especially if the reason is down to age and the unacknowledged bias that age brings with it. The people in this book have achieved public success, but this is not necessarily the criteria for judging our own creativity. I once had a participant in a course who just wanted to be able to write a poem for her granddaughter's baptism. She had very little experience in writing poetry, but she was able in the end to encapsulate all that love in a poem. She read it on the day and it was wonderfully received, especially by her own daughter, who was blown away. And it became a happy memory that would live forever in the family consciousness. Now that is success. In that case, the creative spark within that woman roared to flame just for a moment. We should fan that creative spark within ourselves until it is a flame, and then keep that flame burning through all our different ages. Through all our different ages. Again and again, older people succeed in every area of life, but this seems to have little effect on the myth that creative success only belongs to the young. I think songs for older life will help to solidify that success in our minds and will be another source to go to when we are feeling the pressure to give up on our dreams. I'll just read one or two that kind of struck me as indicative of what I was trying to get across. So, Frank Lloyd Wright was an American architect who designed more than 1,000 structures. Frank believed in organic architecture, buildings that were in harmony with the environment. He built houses in the Pery style, a style marked by horizontal lines to conjure flat, treeless regions. In 1935, Frank designed Falling Water for Lillian Kaufman and her husband, Edgar Kaufman, 43 miles from Pittsburgh in the Allegheny Mountains. The house was constructed over a waterfall on Bear Run River. Kaufman's own engineers claimed that there were falls in the design. Frank buried the engineer's report in the wall of the house. That's what to do with people who's trying to tell you what to do. Though the construction was plagued with conflicts, it was his most successful project. With Falling Water, Frank secured his position as the foremost architect in America and his place in history of architecture. Frank finished Falling Water aged 72 and worked on the Guggenheim Museum in New York until his death at 91. to escape from Steel City, where the streetlights burn smog all day and the iron splatters from the ladle cars that cross the hot metal bridge and hiss molten in the Monongalia River. They wanted somewhere deeper into the woods, where Mrs. K could swim in the naked morning and climb the hills of afternoon. This was your chance after 68 years, and you took it with both hands. There were questions. There are always questions when one enters the unknown. But you refused to listen as they yelped about your feet like hunting dogs who had lost the scent of the mountain lion. You took the load they put on your dream, that burden of expectation and fear, your resolve as powerful as the waterfall at Bear Run, as it dives forever into beauty. So I'll just bring you a couple of examples, but I think everyone will find somebody in the book that they can relate to. You know, we can all relate to Frank McCourt because we know exactly what's going on there. During the Great Depression, Frank's family moved back to Limerick from America. According to Frank's memoir, they lived in a rain-soaked slum while their father drank what little money they had. In 1949, at the age of 19, Frank left Ireland and returned to America. There, Frank was drafted during the Korean War. After the war, Frank entered New York University. In 1967, he earned a master's in Brooklyn College. At the age of 67, Frank won the annual Pulitzer Prize and the annual National Book Critics Award for his memoir, Angela's Ashes. Frank's mother denied the accuracy of his stories. I always find that amusing. Frank's mother denied the accuracy of his stories. Angela's Ashes sold 4 million copies and was in the New York Times bestseller list for 117 weeks. It won a Pulitzer Prize, was translated into 20 languages, and was made into a Hollywood movie. Raymond. Of course, you want to hear about the rain. That's all everyone wants to talk about. As if the rain that fell in my childhood was of a different kind, a brutal fantasy of a thing. But if you're quiet for a minute, I'll tell you. The difference was, my rain stayed forever. I could hear it beat its unceasing homesick drum on the sidewalks of America. Nothing could dispel it, not love, nor truth, not distance, not memory, not forgetfulness. But each man has only so many heartbeats in him, and he must lead his life by the nose, or sit on a bar stool and watch the world go by. So I wrote out my despair and made it famous. And the world looked on amazed, not that there wasn't greater misery everywhere, but that a man could articulate his circumstance so intensely, reach so far back, and sift through the long, dead, and eternal ashes of his struggle. Now, in 2008, can't remember whether it was my birthday or Kathy's birthday, but we went to New York. It's your birthday. I went back. I always ask her for any dates. And we went to see Dave Brubeck at the Blue Note.
Take 5.
Take 5. So Dave Brubeck, Dave studied music at the College of the Pacific in California. He was almost expelled when they discovered he could not sight read. In 1942 he was drafted. While in the army he created one of the first racially integrated bands, the Wolfpack. They formed the Dave Brubeck Quartet in 1951 with Paul Desmond. Together they wrote their biggest hit, Take 5. He continued to play well into old age, performing in 2011 at the age of 91, a month after getting a pacemaker. Dave Brubeck died of heart failure on December the 5th, 2012, one day after his 92nd birthday. Kathy and I were in New York and saw him perform at the Blue Note. My son David, you had something to do with the website, hadn't you, for Dave Brubeck?
Yeah.
It's kind of cool.
I'm very jealous of your Katie. Should be me there.
Okay. The Blue Note. We are not really jazz fans. Not really. Though we do like jazz, but we're not really jazz fans. Not really. We know our Duke Ellington from our Louis Armstrong, but not our Miles Davis from our Chet Baker. We like Dave Brubeck, and we do like good music and slabs of meat that recline and sizzle drip over a plate the size of an American football, with fries in a fat bowl as unctuous as a lover's fingers and greens still wet from the market in Union Square. Well, it is your birthday after all, or maybe mine, and it's exciting to hail a cab and tell the driver, Greenwich Village please, the Blue Note, as if we had the least idea, the least clue where it was or cared. Then Dave Brubeck made his way onto the stage. My doctors tell me I'm rushing things, he said, a little breathlessly, reaching the piano bench, and then proceeds to reduce the whole place to a pulp you could take home in a doggy bag. Very American. I thought it was going to be very American there with doggy bag.
Behind you.
So, I was hoping Marjorie Quanton would be here today, but she didn't make it. But Marjorie lives in Nina, 30 years older, isn't she? Terrific lady. Marjorie came home from school to take over the farm, age 17, her father being ill as a result of wounds and poison gas in the First World War. Most of the horses she bred were sold to London police, the lifeguards of the Swiss Army. When that trade dried up, Marjorie turned to writing and rearing border collies. Though Marjorie had written children's books and newspaper articles, she only started writing novels in her late 50s. When asked where the title of her memoir, Breakfast the Night Before, came from, Marjorie explained, I was going to Spansel Hill. It starts so early. I asked someone in Ennis, this is typical Irish, I asked someone in Ennis what time I'd have to start off. You'd have to have breakfast the night before, he said. Marjorie's book, Peterstown, was launched in December 2019 at the age of 89. And it was her 18th book.
There's hope for us all yet.
Breakfast of Champions. When your father saw the Ghost Brigade move across the fields, he knew it was your time. You left the school that boarded up your true nature and began to take on the farm the way David took on Goliath. And when your father sent you to the fair, you went with eyes and checkbook wide, and you returned, a star rising, still only 17, a woman's courage flowering inside you, cool and steady as the quietness of a quiet horse. Your father kissed your cheeks hello, as if it was goodbye. A legacy of crisp tenors was enough to jump that first fence, and you were off and running. 50 years of love for horses and farming, and the books began to drop like late lambs into the lap of your life. But there are nights when the world is brittle with frost. You miss the old companionships, and the morning kettle jumping on the hob, when it was better to have breakfast the night before. Finish up with this last poem, which is a poem I wrote for Białna, or I was commissioned to write for. It's the only poem I was ever commissioned to write of anything. Somebody actually asked me to write it and paid me to write it.
No filthy lucre, was there?
In 2017, it was for the Białna festival. A Song for Older Life, the original poem. O unworn world, enrapture me, Patrick Cavan. Now that we know we are mortal, let us bend servitude's weighty crowns. Now that we know the sun will rise without us, let us ignore the grey sheets on the laundry floor of the sky and go into the rain-forgiving world. Now let us tongue the fruits that smack the lips with surprise, learning the difference between something rare and something common, and see God's beauty in both. Now it is time to remember we were once creatures who climbed the cloudy mountains just to breed, that grew old beneath the cooling stars and listened to the tuning notes of heaven. We looked for God everywhere, then in each other, calling this the soul and this the life exalted. Now that we are wise enough to know, let us leave those chains in the dust. Let us give love back 100-fold to the people who love us, and forgiveness to those who need it. And let us not sit quiet by friendship's fire when there are humans in the east in need of our shelter, and in the west in need of our bread. The world is beautiful. So let the answer to all the questions be a simple yes. Let us leave the caterpillar's house and enter the delight of the wind spreading earth. As most of you know, my own story follows the same theme as the book, coming late and fulfilling my own potential. Because of my own experience, I know it can be done, and that is why I'm encouraging anyone who thinks their time has passed to read a book and take heart. My research shows that people who participate in any creative field live much longer. They are very happy and too busy to stop. Throw away those supplements and diet books. Take out your pen, pencil, paintbrush and chisel and get stuck into something original, something creative. Leave your mark on the world. A big X where the treasure within you was hidden and you uncovered it.
Well done, Rob. Thank you very much, Ron Carey. Now, a little promo for the next piece of endeavour for April is the month of poetry. happening. It's next Wednesday, and it's the Desmond O'Grady Memorial Reading with Eleanor Hoare, Kieran O'Driscoll and Jamie O'Halloran. And the results of the Desmond O'Grady International Poetry Competition will also be announced by Judge Eleanor Hooker. This title that Dominic implies, I don't know. Anyway, now, it pains me to say this, but for God's sake, in the interest of the publisher, Dominic, and the author, Ron, please don't leave the room without buying a copy of Songs for Older Life. And I'd like to embellish that by saying, by all means, keep writing, keep reading, keep living, because true retirement is death. Good evening.
These are the days, these are the good old days, these are the days of wine and roses, these are the days, the good old days. I was looking for love, I was looking for crazy love. I turned around and you were there. I turned around. These are the days, these are the good old days, these are the days of wine and roses, these are the days, the good old days. I heard a voice, I heard a voice long now, still I turned around and you were there. I turned around. These are the days, these are the good old days, these are the days of wine and roses, these are the days, the good old days. Oh, please let it be